Some writer friends were discussing on Twitter some writing advice from Stephen King. You can find the complete link in the description, but I'll just quickly read. Adverbs are words that modify verbs, adjectives, or other adverbs. They're the ones that usually end in "ly." Adverbs, like the passive voice, seem to have been created with the timid writer in mind. With adverbs, the writer usually tells us he or she is afraid she isn't expressing himself herself clearly, that he or she is not getting the point or the picture across. Consider the sentence, "He closed the door firmly." It's by no means a terrible sentence, but ask yourself if firmly really has to be there. You can argue that it expresses a degree of difference between "he closed the door" and "he slammed the door," and you'll get no argument from me. But what about the context? What about all the enlightening, not to say emotionally moving prose, which came before "he closed the door firmly"? Shouldn't this tell us how he closed the door? Yeah, you get the idea. The problem is that many very famous and very successful writers use adverbs profligately, including Harper Lee, the author of To Kill a Mockingbird. Furthermore, I believe advice like this isn't really very useful because it makes people self-conscious and, focused on the way they're telling the story instead of the story they're telling. I really believe the best way to write is just to speak what's in your heart. And so I have prepared this defiant musical rebuttal of Stephen King. And disclaimer, I am not a musician, so watch this to laugh, not to be entertained by beautiful melodies. I believe the road to hell is paved with adverbs, and I will shout it from the rooftops, said Stephen King. And I say, really, Stephen King? But how will you shout it? Will you shout it menacingly to put fear into the hearts of those timid adverb users you so despise? Will you shout it sexily, flexing your intellectual muscles and manly brilliance, and hoping the ladies will fall for your erudition despite your frog-like features? Will you shout it anxiously, knowing the literary critics do not respect your genres of choice and will write you out of the history of English literature unless you are sufficiently contemptuous of the masses? Will you shout it tenderly, just for the sheer irony of tender shouting? What does tender shouting sound like anyway? I don't know. Stephen King, you've ruined my reading. The adverbs stare at me from every side. Between the characters and me, they form a divide. Stephen King, fear you say, is the reason most people write badly today. Don't you realize advice like this just makes us more afraid? Convinced we'll write 1,000,000 words and never get paid. Stephen King, you've ruined my reading. The adverbs stare at me from every side. Between the characters and me, they form a divide. Tonight, I will go down to the writer's speakeasy, down at the dock where things start to get sleazy. I will feast on dark adverbs, drink the sweet wine of cliches, get drunk on phrases like, "They lived happily ever after," "It was a dark and stormy night," and "Her eyes shone like stars." Then I will stumble home, drunken but tall, and menacingly, anxiously, sexily, tenderly pursue my dreams, adverbs and all.